absolutely no idea what made me want to direct horror movies. So I saw the original Friday the 13th in 1980 on cable, and a week later I was doing drawings like this and stuff like that. So as you can see, yeah, I was immediately an obsessed kid, and I immediately went out and grabbed a Super 8 film camera and I started directing Friday the 13th home movies. It was just that simple. I was a director a week after Friday the 13th and nothing was going to change my path. I don't know what it was about the original Friday the 13th, but after I saw it, I was literally obsessed, and I knew from that very moment that I was going to make horror films for the rest of my life. And it really started with me wanting to be an actor. I just wanted to act so badly. And so I started making the films with my friends and, recruiting all the kids in the neighborhood and stabbing and killing and chopping up all my friends and wearing paper mache hockey masks and things that I fabricated out of household materials. And I really took it seriously. Looking back, I took my Super 8 horror films as an 8-year-old every bit as seriously as I just took my film Zombified. My family was supportive, although my mom just kind of rolled her eyes at the fact I was squirting ketchup on the ceiling every few minutes to make a film, and my father hated cleaning up the mess. But other than that, they knew that I was being highly creative. They saw that I was really on a path, and I think they also knew as well that at a very early age that that's what I was going to be doing for the rest of my life, because it's all I ever talked about. I would eat, breathe, and sleep horror films 24/7, especially Friday the 13th, and all I wanted to do was direct my own Friday the 13th films. My father was much more active in the support by actually helping me film some of my earlier movies. When I first got a video camera, he would actually do some of the shooting, some of the acting, and later on when I actually cast for my first film, Evil Night, he was actually there during that whole process. He helped me get a conference room, place ads in the papers, and he watched 8 hours worth of auditions with me and was a co-producer.
Wait till they get a load of my shit. They think I'm a real pussy, huh? This is it. The ultimate formula for self-creation and telekinesis. This is gonna be one evil night.
Evil Night is really just about Jimmy, the typical college student who's smart and makes straight A's and studies all the time, and he's also a crazed killer. That is, until he is pushed over the edge. No, I'm just kidding. Really, it's just a nerd gets revenge story. I loved a movie called Slaughter High that was made back in 1985 or 86, and I was really just making my own B-movie version of that. I wanted to throw in the camp and the comedy because I was a super camp movie fan at that time, and so I was really just modeling my film after that, to be honest. So it's your basic nerd gets revenge story, and I tried to throw in some original murders and kills that no one had ever seen before. Here's an inside story that most people don't know. Originally, what I was going to do was try to make a sequel to a popular film called The Burning. And the goal was to contact Miramax or Weinstein Brothers. And we actually did. We called them and got them on the phone. And they seemed pretty lenient about giving us permission to shoot this sequel. For whatever reason, didn't raise the money, didn't pursue it, and decided I wanted to write my own story instead. And after I came up with the script, we decided we wanted to shoot it on a very small budget, just as tiny as possible, because it was my first film, and we thought we really shouldn't take on something huge yet. So that's how Evil Night really came to be. We shot it on video because video was cheap. It was a household item that people were starting to have at the time. We made the film in 1992. I was 19 years old when I directed it, and it was my first film that I actually released. I had directed several feature films before that were Friday the 13th fan films that never got released, obviously. But Evil Night was the first one that I was going to put out to the public, so we took it a lot more seriously.
Ah!
What happened?
I broke my nail.
Let me see.
The budget was a paltry $5,000. I paid, my father paid, basically we kept it in the family. We rented equipment from a local production supply house called Tex Cam for renting lighting, you know, barn doors and things like that, and we pretty much just self-financed the whole movie.
Tim! Come on, we gotta go!
As far as the cast and crew, we did hold open auditions. We placed an ad in the local newspaper, and we saw probably about 500-something people for about 10 hours in one day. Our minds were pretty melted by the end of the night. But I still have actually every single audition tape, and it was really fascinating to watch all these different portrayals of my characters. But we selected the best that we could find from that batch of people.
You know, sometimes a man's just gotta put his foot down. Asshole. Whoa, man, stop. What are you doing? Hey, how come you have different shoes on, man? Hey, stop.
The special effects, I also did all those myself because I was a huge Tom Savini worshiper, still am. He's my idol and hero in special effects. And I learned by watching his work, by imitating and emulating, and by, of course, reading Grand Illusions and things like that he put out. So I learned how to create a lot of stuff just by, using a lot of household items and things like that. And then I would buy supplies, blood and gels and things like that, and some makeup and latex, and really just haphazardly threw a lot of things together. I wasn't really focusing on the special effects in the film as much as I was the story, to be honest. It took about 4 weeks to film. To this day, still the fastest movie I ever completed. It was an absolute blast. It was a riot. One of the best casts I've ever worked with. They were all so much fun and so personable. And we really just had a great time making that film. The only interesting stories about Evil Night that come to mind are the fact that we did have 3 different people wearing the killer's outfit for the ending sequence. The original actor, we lost touch with him, and I believe Rick Deskin, who was one of the headbanger actors in Evil Night, wore the mask for part of it, and then I wore the mask for another part of it.
May 26th, 1995, 9:37 p.m. This is what a cling-off looks like.
Forehead.
The post-production process for my S.O.V. films was actually quite interesting. I always thought ahead, and I had learned the craft of shooting and editing in camera, and I would do that pretty often. So when it came time for post, editing Evil Night was relatively easy because most of the shots were actually cut within the camera, something you would never do in this day and age. But again, this was the time, this was where it was at, so that's what I did. When I shot Evil Night, I absolutely had distribution in mind. I had seen a few other shot-on-video horror films, I think Blood Lake, and a few of the early ones like that, Boarding House, Iced, and some of those others. And I thought, wow, that's something that I can do. But when I stepped back and looked at the final cut, even as a 19-year-old kid with a huge ego and a big thought process behind it, I was like, probably not going to get anything, but let's go for it. So we sent it out to some of the biggest companies that we could, Academy Home Entertainment, Columbia TriStar, even Warner Brothers, and I still have all the rejection letters. So basically, after the rejection letters, I decided, okay, I want to get this movie out there. I want people to see it. Let me start my own distribution company. It was just that simple. So I started taking out ads in Fangoria magazine, Under the Boneyard, Cemetery Cinema it became next, Horoscope Films, you know, any of those types of things that you may have seen in there. It was all Todd, Jason, Falcon, Cook. But that was my avenue, really. I decided, okay, if nobody else will take it, I'll release it myself. And slowly but surely I was able to release all the other films, and I was able to garner several other S.O.V films in my catalog, and I wound up having quite a lot of stuff in there. I had some of Kevin Lindenmuth's movies, Addicted to Murder, Vampires and Other Stereotypes, things like that. A lot of Chris Seaver LBP flicks I had.
I just sent what I had at the time to Cemetery Cinema, and it was run by a gnarly dude named Todd Cook, who started the company and was making his own films and had been doing it since he was little as well. And we had both had a love of Friday the 13th, so he saw my stuff, saw that there was potential in it, and decided to give it a shot and start selling my stuff. And from like 93 until 98, I was making movies for Cemetery Cinema.
Most of those S.O.V directors wound up in the catalogs at some point through negotiations and things like that. So we did sell quite a lot of other titles besides, you know, my own films. That was a really unique time. I was an actor in the film, as well as Lisa Forbes, who played Shannon. Later in real life, Lisa Forbes married Todd Jason Cook and became Lisa Cook. And as I helped her develop a following and a fan club, and she became Horror Princess, acting in all these B schlocky S.O.V films I did, we decided to go back into Evil Night 2 years after its completion, and we put ourselves in the movie a second time. So, yeah, we're in the movie as two different sets of characters, and I have much longer hair, and she looks a whole lot different. She had lost a lot of weight, got really thin, had blonde hair, and yeah, basically we put ourselves in the same film twice, and we always jokingly said, you know, 20 years later, let's put ourselves back in the same movie as parents, and then grandparents, and then zombies, of course, because we'll be old and wrinkled. When I first got Evil Night done, I felt like a rock star, I'll be honest. I mean, it was my first feature that I'd actually made with the intent to release, and I did release it under Cemetery Cinema. And it was exciting. It was one of the most exciting things I had ever done. It didn't get very good reviews. A lot of people hated it at the time, but then there were also a lot of fans that liked it. So, I mean, it had a halfway balance at some point. But looking back on it now, all these years later, I'm still totally glad I did it, and I'm still totally unashamed of everything I've ever done, and I'm always going to have a sense of pride about all my work. I love the old campy films, I love the old schlocky stuff, and I do look at my own work quite often, just because I like the trip down memory lane, and it also serves the purpose of showing me my growth throughout the whole production process of my life.
That was some awesome skating. I've never seen you do those tricks before.
I've been trying to do those tricks forever. Seems like when I'm pumped, I can do anything.